I stood in the middle of our living room, my arms crossed, my jaw tight, watching Marlene zip up her suitcase. The weight in my chest was unbearable, like someone had hollowed me out and filled me with concrete. This was it, the end. I always imagined that if my marriage ever fell apart, there would be some warning signs. Late-night arguments, cold shoulders, silence stretching between us like an ocean. But there weren't. At least, not the kind I could recognize in time. Instead, my wife stood before me now, suitcase in hand, her expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice calmer than I expected. It wasn't begging. I refused to beg. But there was still a part of me that hoped, even after everything, that she would stop and reconsider. Marlene exhaled sharply and shook her head, barely sparing me a glance. I already made up my mind. I had spent the last few days trying to process what had led us here. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the sudden distance that had grown between us like an invisible wall. And then, the truth I hadn't been prepared for. The truth that gutted me. She had found someone else. I discovered it by accident, but I should have known. The way she smiled at her phone, the new perfume she never wore around me, the sudden urge to go to girls' nights she never cared about before. And when I finally confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. Her words echoed in my head. I didn't plan for this to happen, but I deserve to be happy. Happy. As if the years we spent together had just been a prelude to this moment. As if my happiness never factored into the equation. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat and stepped closer to the door. "All right, go ahead," I said, voice firm. "But the moment you step out that door, our marriage is finished. Don't ever think about coming back." Marlene hesitated. Just for a second. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle, and her lips parted like she was about to say something. But whatever it was, she swallowed it down. She walked past me without looking back. And just like that, it was over. The silence she left behind was deafening. My home, our home, felt different already. Like something vital had been ripped out of it, leaving only an empty shell behind. I wanted to believe I'd be fine, that this moment wouldn't define me. But as I stared at the closed door, the truth was impossible to ignore. I had no idea what came next. The moment Marlene stepped out, something inside me cracked. I heard the door click shut, the sound echoing through the house like a final sentence in a book I never wanted to read. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been just moments ago, waiting for something, anger, relief, maybe even a sense of closure. But none of it came. The silence was unbearable. I walked through the house, my hands grazing over the furniture we picked out together, the photos on the walls, the little reminders of a life that no longer existed. Every inch of this place was soaked in memories, but now it all felt foreign, like I had woken up in someone else's home. My feet carried me to the kitchen out of habit. I opened the fridge, then closed it again without grabbing anything. What was I even looking for? Comfort? Distraction? None of it was going to change the fact that my wife had left me. And not just left, she had replaced me. The weight of that truth settled in my chest like a boulder. I walked to the counter, gripping the edge as my breathing grew uneven. This wasn't just about her leaving. It was the betrayal, the fact that she had let herself fall into someone else's arms while I was here, oblivious. She had smiled at me, kissed me, shared a bed with me, all while knowing she had already chosen someone else. And yet, she acted like she was the victim. I deserved to be happy. Her words burned in my head. I deserved to be happy too, didn't I? Didn't I deserve at least an ounce of respect? A goodbye that didn't feel like an afterthought? I grabbed the nearest object, a coffee mug, and nearly hurled it across the room. But I stopped myself. I wasn't going to give in to rage. Not for her. Instead, I exhaled, forcing myself to think. What now? I could sit here drowning in self-pity, or I could figure out what came next. My marriage was over, that part was clear. But my life wasn't. And I refused to let Marlene's betrayal be the thing that defined me. I needed a plan. And I needed to start by figuring out who I was without her. I spent the rest of the night walking in circles around the house, stopping in random rooms as if I was expecting to find something. An answer, a feeling, maybe even some kind of clarity. But there was nothing. Just silence. Her side of the closet was half empty, the hangers swaying slightly as if even they weren't sure what to do now. The bathroom counter, which used to be cluttered with her endless supply of lotions and skincare bottles, was eerily neat. It was like she had never been here, like I had dreamed up the last decade of my life. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed we had shared for years, and stared at the indentation where she used to sleep. My hand brushed over the sheets. Cold. The weight in my chest grew heavier. I wanted to believe this was for the best, that by walking out, she had done me a favor. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, with no idea what was waiting at the bottom. A deep sigh escaped me, and I rubbed my face with both hands. I had spent so much time being a husband, being her husband, that I had forgotten what it was like to just be me. And now, the question I had never thought to ask was staring me dead in the face. Who was I without her? I needed to get out of the house. Grabbing my keys, I walked out without a real plan, driving aimlessly through the city. Everything was the same. Cars rushing by, people moving about their lives, streetlights flickering in the night. But I wasn't. The world hadn't stopped turning just because mine had been shattered. I pulled into a 24-hour diner, the kind with neon signs and worn-out booths. It smelled like coffee and burnt toast, and somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Sliding into a booth by the window, I ordered a black coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes, gave me a knowing look, like she had seen 100 men sitting here just like me, staring into space with too many thoughts and not enough answers. "Rough night?" she asked, setting the cup down. I let out a dry laugh. Something like that. She didn't push, just nodded before walking away. I wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into my skin. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to feel it. Everything I had been pushing down. The anger, the grief, the disbelief. It all swirled inside me like a storm, threatening to break free. And then, just as I was about to drown in it, my phone vibrated on the table. A text. From her. My pulse spiked, and for a second, I debated whether or not to even look. But my hands moved on their own, unlocking the screen. "Marlene, I just wanted to say I didn't mean to hurt you. I hope someday you'll understand." I stared at the words, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. She hoped I'd understand. Like she had made some noble sacrifice instead of tearing our marriage apart. Like I was supposed to pat her on the back and say, "It's okay, Marlene. Go be happy with the man you threw our life away for." I clenched my jaw, shoving the phone back onto the table. No, she had made her choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. I sat in that diner for what felt like hours, staring at Marlene's message, my coffee growing cold. The words blurred on the screen, each one digging deeper into my chest like tiny, invisible knives. "I just wanted to say I didn't mean to hurt you. I hope someday you'll understand." Understand? What exactly was I supposed to understand? That the woman I had trusted with everything had decided I wasn't enough? That she had whispered, "I love you," in my ear at night, while secretly planning to walk away? That the life we built together was just something she could toss aside like an old sweater that no longer fit? The waitress, sensing my spiraling thoughts, came back over with a fresh cup of coffee. She didn't say anything, just poured and walked away. Maybe she knew there were some things even a stranger couldn't fix. I needed air. Grabbing my phone and keys, I walked out of the diner, the night air hitting me like a slap. I took deep breaths, trying to keep myself steady. But nothing about this felt steady. It felt like I was standing on a crumbling foundation, and every second that passed, another piece broke off, dragging me further into the unknown. I leaned against my car, staring at the empty street, and before I knew it, I was dialing a number I never thought I'd call. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was groggy, confused. "Hey, Ernie, it's me." There was a pause. "Damn, Owen. It's almost 3 in the morning. You good?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Not even close." Another pause. Then, "Where are you?" "Some diner on the east side." "I'll be there in 10. Ernie had been my best friend since college, the kind of guy who didn't ask unnecessary questions, just showed up when it mattered. And right now, I needed someone, anyone, to remind me that I wasn't just some discarded piece of Marlene's past. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, I was sitting on the hood of my car, arms crossed, my mind racing. He stepped out, dressed in sweats and an old hoodie, his hair a mess. "You look like hell," he said. "Feel worse," I admitted. He let out a slow breath and leaned against the car beside me. "All right, tell me what happened." So I did. I told him everything. The months of suspicion, the moment I confronted her, the way she packed her bags like she was just heading out for a weekend trip instead of walking away from a decade of marriage. I told him about the text, about how she expected me to understand. Ernie listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finally finished, he let out a long whistle. "Damn," he muttered. "That's cold." "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "It is." For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Then Ernie turned to me, his expression serious. "So what now?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I had spent so much time thinking about what she wanted, what she decided. But what about me? I couldn't sit in this limbo forever, waiting for the pain to dull. I needed to take control of my life again. And the first step? Letting go. For real this time. I took my phone out, opened her text one last time, and without overthinking it, I typed out my response. "Me, you made your choice. Now live with it. Don't contact me again." Then, before I could hesitate, I blocked her number. Ernie glanced over, nodding in approval. "Good call." I exhaled, feeling something shift inside me. The pain was still there, but for the first time since she left, I felt a spark of something else. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to move forward. The next morning, I woke up in my half-empty bed with an unfamiliar feeling, a strange, unsettling quiet. For years, I had woken up next to Marlene, her scent lingering on the pillows, the soft sound of her breathing filling the room. But now, all that remained was emptiness. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just alone. I was really alone. I had spent the night at home after Ernie dropped me off, but sleep had been impossible. My mind had raced with everything that had happened. The betrayal, the moment she walked out, the text, the way I had finally cut her off. It was done. Irreversible. So why did it still feel like I was standing in the wreckage? I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the water run hot enough to burn. Maybe it could wash away the sick feeling in my stomach. Maybe it could make me forget, even just for a little while. But nothing could erase the truth. Marlene had moved on. And now, whether I liked it or not, I had to do the same. A house that didn't feel like home. After getting dressed, I wandered into the kitchen, only to realize I had no appetite. The house felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her. Her favorite mug on the shelf, the throw blanket she always curled up with, the stupid scented candle she loved. I needed to get out. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, my feet carrying me to my car. I didn't have a plan, no real destination in mind, but I knew I couldn't sit in that house another second. So I just drove. The streets blurred past me, the radio playing some song about heartbreak that I immediately switched off. I didn't need music to remind me of my misery. I was living it. At some point, I found myself near the gym I used to go to. It had been months since I stepped foot in there, and I wasn't even sure why I pulled into the parking lot. Maybe I just needed to feel like I was doing something, anything to distract myself. I walked in, the scent of sweat and rubber greeting me. It was almost comforting. At least here, pain was expected. It was part of the process. I headed straight for the weights, gripping the cold metal like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I started lifting, each rep burning, my muscles straining. It wasn't just about the workout. I needed to get all of it out. The anger, the frustration, the betrayal. With every lift, I pictured Marlene's face. Not in a vengeful way, but in a final way. Like I was physically pushing her out of my system. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. The reality check. An hour later, I was drenched in sweat, my arms shaking, but for the first time in days, I felt lighter. Not healed. Not okay. but like I had taken one small step towards something better. As I grabbed my water bottle and headed toward the exit, I heard someone call my name. Owen? I turned, surprised to see an old friend, Reed. We used to work together a few years back, but life had pulled us in different directions. He looked the same, broad shoulders, always slightly unshaven, the kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything. Man, I haven't seen you in forever, he said, giving me a clap on the back. What brings you here? I hesitated, not really wanting to get into it, but before I could brush it off, he gave me a knowing look. You've got that just got dumped face. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Something like that. He whistled. Damn. How long? 2 days, I admitted. Reed nodded like he understood. That's fresh. Hurts like hell, doesn't it? I exhaled. Yeah. For a second, I thought he was going to give me some cliché advice about moving on, but instead, he just nodded again. Let me guess, right now, you feel like nothing makes sense. Like everything you thought you knew is upside down. And you're sitting in your house, staring at the walls, wondering if you'll ever feel normal again. I blinked. That's weirdly accurate. He smirked. Been there, man. Trust me, you're gonna get through it. Might not feel like it now, but one day, you'll wake up, and it won't be the first thing on your mind anymore. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. You doing anything later? He asked. A bunch of us are grabbing drinks tonight. Might do you some good to get out. For a moment, I considered saying no, but then I thought about the alternative. Sitting in my house, drowning in memories of a woman who didn't care about me anymore. Yeah, I said finally. Yeah, I think I'll come. A new beginning? That night, I found myself at a bar downtown, surrounded by people who weren't Marlene, in a place that didn't remind me of her. And for the first time since she walked out that door, I didn't feel completely lost. The bar was packed, the kind of Friday night crowd that hummed with loud conversations, clinking glasses, and a low bass thumping in the background. I stood at the edge of it, drink in hand, watching Reed animatedly tell a story to the group we were with. I was here, physically, but my mind kept drifting. A few days ago, I had a wife, a home, a routine. Now, I was a guy standing in a bar, surrounded by strangers, pretending that I wasn't still bleeding inside. I took a sip of my drink, the burn doing little to ground me. Reed clapped a hand on my shoulder. You look like you're thinking way too hard, man. I smirked half-heartedly. Just adjusting. He nodded, understanding. Yeah, it takes time. But you being here? That's a good step. Before I could respond, a voice chimed in from beside me. Bad breakup? I turned to see a woman standing there, her dark eyes filled with curiosity. She was effortlessly pretty, sharp features, confident posture, the kind of person who looked like she never second-guessed anything. I hesitated. Something like that. She gave me a knowing smile. Figured. You've got that lost look. I huffed a laugh. Appreciate that. I don't mean it in a bad way, she added quickly. Just, you remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who thought their whole world ended when their relationship did. I took another sip of my drink. And did it? She shrugged. At first, yeah. But then he realized that the version of himself he was mourning, that guy didn't exist anymore. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. I let her words sink in. The version of myself that had been married to Marlene. The man who trusted her, loved her, built a future with her. He was gone. I didn't know who I was yet, but maybe, just maybe, I wasn't supposed to. Not yet. Reed nudged me. You good? I nodded, finally feeling a little lighter. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time since she walked out, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, dragging me out of sleep. My head was heavy, but it wasn't from drinking. It was from thinking, from feeling. For days, I had been walking through the ruins of my old life, sifting through the wreckage, trying to understand how everything had fallen apart. But last night, something shifted. Maybe I wasn't supposed to piece everything back together. Maybe I was supposed to build something new. I pushed myself out of bed and went through the motions, shower, coffee, getting dressed. Everything felt different, but not in the way it had right after Marlene left. This wasn't just emptiness. It was space. And space meant opportunity. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts. My thumb hovered over Marlene's name for a second before I remembered. She was blocked. Good. I had nothing left to say to her. Instead, I sent a text to Ernie. Me? Breakfast? My treat. The response came almost instantly. Ernie, thought you'd never ask. See you in 30. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. Old friends, new conversations. We met at a diner across town. One of those hole-in-the-wall places with cracked leather booths and coffee that could burn a hole in your stomach. The kind of place that didn't change, no matter how much your life did. Ernie was already there, sipping from a mug, watching me as I slid into the seat across from him. You look decent, he said, raising an eyebrow. Progress? I smirked. Something like that. The waitress came over, pouring me a cup before I even asked. We ordered, and for a few minutes, we just ate in silence, the comfort of familiarity settling between us. Then Ernie leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. All right, let's cut the small talk. You're up early, reaching out. What's on your mind? I took a slow sip of coffee, thinking. I don't know, I admitted. I just don't want to sit in that house alone anymore. Feels like a tomb. Ernie nodded like he understood. So what's the plan? That was the question, wasn't it? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I think I'm done being stuck in the past. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out why she left, or what I could have done differently. It doesn't matter anymore. Ernie studied me for a second, then grinned. Well damn. Look at you. Owen 2.0. I snorted. Don't get ahead of yourself. I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, but you're trying, he said. That's more than a lot of guys do. I let that sink in. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what happened. I was making decisions for myself, and it felt good, letting go of ghosts. After breakfast, I drove back to the house, stepping inside and letting the silence settle around me. But this time, it didn't feel like a weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like a challenge. I walked into the bedroom, pulled open the closet, and started yanking things out. Marlene's leftover clothes, old photos, gifts she had given me. Anything that tied me to the past, I threw into a box. An hour later, I stood there, staring at everything I had gathered. It was time. I grabbed my keys, loaded the box into the car, and drove straight to the donation center. No second-guessing, no hesitation. By the time I got home, the place already felt lighter. Not just the house. Me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting over. A week had passed since I watched Marlene walk out of my life. 7 days of silence, of rebuilding, of learning how to exist without her. And yet, today felt different. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up feeling like I was carrying a mountain on my back. The weight had lessened, maybe not completely gone, but lighter, manageable. I stepped out of bed, stretched, and made coffee, not because I needed it to function, but because I wanted it. The difference felt huge. My phone buzzed. Ernie, hitting the gym later? I smirked and typed back. Me, you just want to see if I can lift more than you now. Ernie, guilty. But hey, gotta keep the progress going, right? He wasn't wrong. I finished my coffee, grabbed my gym bag, and stepped outside. The sun was bright, the air crisp. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was moving towards something. A better version of myself. A life that was mine to build, on my terms. Marlene had made her choice. And now, I was making mine. No more looking back. Only forward. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited to see where the road would take me.